Before we begin, China Insider has been demonetized, so please subscribe to our new channels, David on China and David Zhang 360. You can search David on China or David Zhang 360 with no space on YouTube, or simply click the links in the description. Guys, I know therapy is expensive, so I've got an alternative solution. If you ever feel worthless or no point in life, just look at China's radars. They sold this stuff to Venezuela and Iran. Now, normally radars detect stealth jets and airstrikes, the incoming stuff, by sending out radio waves and analyzing what's bouncing back. Think of it like, shouting into a canyon and listening for the echo. But this time, obviously, instead of sound, it's EMR waves moving at the speed of light. They not only function as large clothes drying racks, maybe that's why the PLA soldiers all have this perfect tofu block folding blankets. Every day is laundry day. Okay, sorry, I kind of sidetracked. But the point is, Chinese radars like JY-27 and the YLC-8B detect incoming airstrikes and stealth bombers with ancient Chinese technology. Yeah, I was shocked too. If the radar is destroyed, then yeah, the airstrike did happen. But if the radar is still standing, well, I guess the airstrike didn't happen yet. Okay, so all jokes aside, but this is now the second case of real-life operation examples of Temu radars, Chinese-made radars that were sold to Venezuela. After the capture of Maduro, you'd think that Iran would be checking if their radars really worked or not, especially because they bought it from China. But now that the rumor that Chinese ICBMs are filled with water because they sold the fuel for money seems to make more sense, given the fact that it doesn't seem like their equipment are really working. Now, if anything, I think the Taiwanese should be feeling more comfort knowing that they're up against literally, off-the-shelf equipment from Temu. Not just the radar though, the satellites too. This Chinese ship says that their navigation powered by the Beidou satellite system isn't working due to American electronic warfare. Now you gotta remember, Beidou is supposed to be this revolutionary challenger to the American GPS and supposedly keeping Chinese electronic and space warfare in this current generation of competition.
然后现在依然是找不到信号，没有定位，是没有这里都是没有信号的。希望能赶紧恢复信号，停止战争。我们都想回家呢。
Just earlier, they were touting how the system was so great and powerful, it's now being employed to solve the issue of electronic warfare. Now, here's how you know this whole thing with Iran actually shook the CCP. This image was posted on their official military X account for the PLA. 5 lessons from US-Israel strikes on Iran. First is enemy within, aka spies. The second is blind faith in peace. Third is logic of superior firepower. The fourth is illusion of victory. And fifth, self-reliance. Now, why would a communist party built on absolute control, supposedly total correctness, need to validate these 5 points or 5 elements? It's because they know that they can't trust those 5 elements. Now, spies in China, obviously, there's literally trust issues amongst the top level officials in China. The second one about peace, I'm not so sure if they're self-aware. No one is going to attack China unless, obviously, China attacks Taiwan. Superior firepower, well, the US has repeatedly shown to us that Chinese Temu equipments don't really work. Illusion of victory, again, not sure how this applies to China yet. In propaganda talk, though, yeah, their domestic audience thinks that they're always winning. Actually, I'll spend a little bit more detail talking about this in a later bit of the video. But last but most importantly, self-reliance. This is basically China's version of that meme. I ain't reading all that. Happy for you though, or sorry that happened. Like, you're literally on your own. Now, people might think that because US strikes on Iran happened during a time where China is supposed to be this alternative hegemon or the alternative global leader, right? That China and Iran, or China will come to help Iran. Let's just say that in most of the cases, it's this. Yeah, mouth cannons or word cannons, only strong, angry letters sent to the US, how they're protesting this. And unfortunately, I think the idea that China is a paper tiger is really true now. And many people are arguing this idea that China doesn't necessarily need Iran, so therefore they're going to abandon them for their own security and for their own benefits. While I think that is true, I do think that China's objective with Iran is a little bit more complex than people think. So I just want to quickly reiterate what that relationship looks like. Some people think that it's not that deep. Well, I'm here to tell you that the relationship is very deep and is very important. So Iran's main value to China isn't necessarily the cheap oil export, the gas station, right? It's actually the four distractor theory. So the CCP wants to have at least four distractors for the US, these elements that can push American resources distracted or divested across the globe in different regions at all times. Things like terrorism, maybe the North Korean nuclear problem, China itself, the rise or say the economic competition, or something like what's happening with Ukraine. These are important for the US to get deeply involved in. Now, that was the thinking during the early 2000s, during especially the war on terror, after the US got into Iraq and Afghanistan. And so Iran's export of terrorist proxies supporting the mess that is in the Middle East obviously benefits the CCP by distracting the US. The problem is the world has changed. Now, in 2026, if Trump wants to solve the Iranian regime problem once and for all, that means China effectively permanently loses one of its distractors or control of the Middle East, which it also uses to go to countries like the Saudi Arabia, UAE, other Gulf nations to kind of buy deals from them in hopes to exchange for certain levels of calmness in the region, right? So this so-called alternative world order, as we see it now, is falling apart because the original thinking that we had of this idea that Iran is sort of the core of chaos in the region for China to be able to advance and grow elsewhere, I don't think that theory is still standing. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not effective anymore. It just means that I think the reliability of that factor has decreased. Now, the same theory that you question how the US may have problems defending its allies and partners in the region, such as in the Indo-Pacific, has just landed on the CCP's head as well. So that same concept, right? You say, well, if say a war breaks out between Taiwan and China, could the U.S. come to its defense of say Japan and South Korea and other countries? Well, just look at Venezuela, right? When the U.S. did the Maduro capture, what did China do? The U.S. literally took Maduro while the Chinese delegation was still in the country. Trump is now in this joint operation with Israel to strike and bomb Iran to remove the Ayatollah multiple times, while Chinese radars failed to work, or that China has not been able to, at least I think on paper, do anything concrete to support Iran. Russia's war against Ukraine hasn't gone anywhere in the past year or so on both sides. So the supposedly multipolar world, as it looks great on paper, the BRICS system, whatever, has gone silent when the US says so. So the third world now, I think, has to reevaluate the question if China is really a reliable partner in an alternative to the current global order or the international order, right? So domestically, inside China, you're still going to see, yes, we're winning. The US is failing, Israel's failing, Iran's doing great. And the credibility of the Chinese Communist Party is very bad, but the only thing that's piecing it together still is the censorship. People just simply don't get the same information, right? For example, you have this Chinese military expert
美国发出低煤弹，你只要把这个火点起来，以色列半小时我就能灭掉。
who said that if US attacks Iran, Iran will take down Israel in half an hour. Obviously, nobody thinks that's going to be true, but that's what they want for the propaganda. Before the strikes happened, there were people predicting that the US wouldn't dare.
你敢打吗？如果美国现在选择动伊朗，以色列本土肯定得遭殃。
美国会打伊朗吗？
哎呦我的妈！
我一想到这个事儿我就想笑。你认为美国会不会打伊朗？美国穷得叮当响，家里面啥也没有，每天都在装逼。他敢打吗？给他1000个胆子都不敢打。
打伊朗吧，不敢。就是不管谁跟我俩叫板说美国敢打伊朗，吹牛逼。
那么美国不敢打伊朗啊，因为中国给了美国底线，不能打伊朗。打伊朗在这与中国为敌啊。
伊朗啊，仅用一颗导弹就吓退了老美。
Because Iran's not panicking. Comments like this, where they're questioning this guy, saying that can you just be right once? Because the same thing they did with Venezuela. Perhaps next will be Cuba. Actually, it became a meme, but or when the first day it actually happened on Douyin. This is when I just went on Douyin to search. This is before the Khamenei was being killed was actually announced. You already saw these videos were saying that, oh yeah, Khamenei escaped the first wave of assassination strikes. The next waves are going to be harder to locate and target him. Obviously, that was all a lie because later Khamenei was found to have been killed on the first day. Bilibili, which is like China's YouTube, the horizontal scrolling comments are all laughing at them. This one here says, I'm here for the archaeological experience, and this one says, I'm here to witness history. This is obviously a joke about Iran's leadership becoming like historical figures because they've all been sent to 72 version heaven or whatever that thing they're calling. Or raise the flag first. This is another meme, which basically says that whenever there's major events happening around the world, the CCP's narrative has to be protected first. And people knows that this official narrative is so disconnected from the reality, but obviously that's what people are saying, get your narrative straight first. And so the meme about how certain country isn't panicking or certain country isn't nervous, right? They said the same thing about Venezuela. They're saying Maduro isn't panicking. The track record of these types of videos, hilariously bad, predicting the opposite completely. For example, when Venezuela was to talk, Chinese military influencers would say that, they got like a protection squad, or that the Chinese radars are going to help them, or that certain things are going to happen. Obviously, when it happened, they've gone silent, and now you've got people saying that Iran wasn't panicking. Well, they're panicking now, and say Cuba's going to be next. Are they going to keep making those videos? Probably. Again, it's to keep the domestic narratives going, right? Because that's the only thing they have. Now, to finish off this video, I want to talk about this Canadian professor named Zhang who has been going viral for his prediction on the Iran war. In this 2024 lecture, so by the way, this is before Trump came into office, he had a lecture called The Iran Trap. He argued that Trump would return to power, the US would move towards a war with Iran, and that Iran would try to provoke the US into an unwinnable conflict. And so if the US invaded Iran, it would be, a logistical disaster similar to Athens' invasion of Sicily in 415 BCE. So a lot of these like game theories, just references to history, and also in separate interviews, he said things like that US boots on the ground was possible, which it turns out now might be a possibility, right? So while these predictions he's done could be correct, and some are correct, it's also very easy for people to think that, wow, this guy knows what's going on. For example, Trump was going to win 2024. I think this was something that I think most people, even if you don't support it, probably believed it was going to happen based on the state of the country at the time. And Iran being China's oil supply and Trump's ultimate goal, whether you like it or not, is to cut China's global influence and supply lines. So a war with Iran was probably inevitable. But if you understand the China angle, which is the thing that most people don't want to believe in, is that this isn't really, yes, it's focused on Iran, but it's really about China. Because like I mentioned with all these things, right, every action that has been done so far has reflected on China being this core of an alternative international order, a problematic one, a failed one at keeping its promise. So what I find really weird about his current analysis, for example, in this lecture on asymmetric warfare,
actually, those nations that are poor actually have more energy, they're more open, and they're more cohesive. All right, so let me give you an example. This is what we call the Shahad drones. Each of these drones costs $50,000 at most, okay? At most. It can go as cheap as $35,000 US. But one of them is $50,000. As you can see, you can fit a lot of these drones to a truck that can go anywhere in Iran, and they can hide anywhere. All right? So the thing to understand is, first of all, these drones are cheap. They're easy to make. They make about 500 a day.
He's claiming that Iran sends a drone at a US base. It only costs $50,000. America fires a $1 million missile from the THAAD system. 2 more follows if the first one misses, so $3 million total to spend to kill one $50,000 drone, which is asymmetric in the sense that Iran spends so little to make something cost so much firing for that one particular counterstrike, right? So with the quantities, Iran makes 500 drones a day, has 80,000 in stock, cheap drones, costly missiles. So if I understand his argument correctly, Professor Zhang is saying that bows and arrows are better than rifles because, while they're cheaper to make, you can make lots of arrows in a day, and rifles cost more and are corrupt, if that makes sense. What this argument doesn't include at all is the factor of, or the value of human lives. Forget the operational errors, because THAAD missiles, the systems aren't used for drones, it's for ballistic missile defense, but the real value of the cost of saving a human life, right? Terrorist regimes use civilians as meat shields. Civilized nations protect their citizens to the best of their ability without a price tag attached. That's the duty of the elected officials. Asymmetric warfare, when used against a brutal regime, like the CCP, in the case of Taiwan, that will be asymmetric because of the sheer size of the military in China versus the sheer size of the military in Taiwan. The point of asymmetric warfare is to stop, or possible to the best of your ability, to defend a civil society. When used by a totalitarian or authoritarian nation, it is exchanging lives innocent lives for the survival of the regime, for those in power. So you see the difference here, right? Just because, and this is purely on the talk of the asymmetric warfare. We're not even including the real goal here for Iran, which is to remove the Ayatollah, remove the Iranian regime in power, to bring back a peaceful regime for the people, or a peaceful nation for the people of Iran. And obviously there's clear objectives being accomplished daily, which that will make this video too long. But the point is, just purely based on this asymmetric warfare talk, that's already not true. Other predictions he's done, such as, and I think it really doesn't make any sense based on the current reality, he's claiming that the Muslim world will unite to fight back against what's happening with the actions of Israel and the United States. He calls it the American Empire. Yeah, I don't know who else calls it the American Empire except for CCP shells and others who are anti-America. But right now we know at least Saudi Arabia and Qatar have publicly declared that they're going to be involved in this war against Iran because, well, the Iranians actually sent in drones and strikes against places like Dubai. So you're telling me that somehow Iran is going to unite the Muslim world against Israel and the US after sending drones into civilian areas? I don't think that's how it works. So what is really the reality? Well, it's very simple. The goal of removing the Iranian leadership is to return peace to the Middle East. I hope this is not a forever war. Without the Middle East's biggest exporter of terror, the US can finally focus on the Indo-Pacific, permanently. There's also clearly a generational or multi-generational gap in military power, not simply an asymmetric difference in warfare. What's being done to the regime in Iran versus what Iran is fighting back with, we've already seen such a decrease over their capabilities. And I think this is going to end quite quickly. But the point is, this is not a simple case of attrition, because both sides, yeah, they have a lot of money that they need to spend on this war. But I don't think the Iranian government is really in a position to talk about attrition, because eventually things will run out. And the fight against Iran is honestly the interest of the Middle East allies anyways. So I don't see how this is going to end with the US being defeated against, such a, I don't even know how to say it, behind power. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, but that's just my sort of analysis on the Middle East, what's happening in China in relations to Iran and everything else. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching this video. We'll see you next time.